The woman who sold me her house kept showing up with her whole family for Sunday dinner because it is their tradition. So I served them a meal they'll never forget. I saved for 11 years to buy a house. 11 years of renting apartments with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's alarm clock every morning. 11 years of putting money away every paycheck and telling myself it would be worth it. When I finally found the house I wanted, I almost could not believe it was in my budget. It was a 3-bedroom with a big kitchen and a backyard with a patio and a fireplace in the living room. The seller was this older woman named Dottie, who kept saying how hard it was to let the house go. She told me during the walkthrough that her family had Sunday dinners there every week for over 20 years. I told her that was really sweet. She teared up and said she hoped I would love the house as much as her family did. I closed on it in March and moved in the first week of April. I spent the whole first weekend setting everything up. I bought new furniture. I painted 2 of the bedrooms. I deep cleaned the kitchen and stocked the fridge. By Sunday, I was exhausted and just wanted to sit on my couch and do nothing. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the door and Dottie was standing there with a casserole dish. Behind her was a man about my age, a woman holding a baby, an older man with a cane, and 2 teenagers. Dottie smiled and said they were here for Sunday dinner. I thought she meant she was bringing me a housewarming meal, so I thanked her and reached for the dish. She walked right past me into the house. The whole family followed. They went straight to the dining room and started pulling chairs out. The older man sat at the head of the table like it was assigned seating. One of the teenagers opened my fridge and grabbed a drink without asking. I stood in my own hallway trying to figure out what just happened. Dottie came back out and told me they do Sunday dinner every week and that it was a family tradition, and she assumed I would not mind. I told her I was not expecting guests and I did not have food ready for 7 people. She said that was fine. They brought the casserole, and I just needed to provide the sides and drinks. I just needed to provide the sides and drinks in my house that I just bought from her. I was too shocked to do anything, so I kind of just let it happen that first time. They stayed for 3 hours. The teenagers left crumbs everywhere. The man with the cane fell asleep in my recliner. The woman with the baby changed a diaper on my new couch. When they finally left, Dottie told me she would see me next Sunday. I did not say anything because I honestly thought it was a one-time thing, and she was just being sentimental. The next Sunday, they showed up again. This time, the man my age, whose name was Reggie, brought a cooler and put his drinks in my fridge to make room. He moved my stuff to the back like it was his kitchen. Dottie brought another casserole and asked me why I did not have rolls ready. I told her I did not know they were coming again. She looked at me like I was crazy and said she told me this was every week. I told her politely that I was not comfortable with this being a regular thing. She got real quiet and then said the house was built for family gatherings and that she sold it to me because I seemed like someone who would honor that. I told her I bought a house, not a tradition. She started crying. Reggie stepped in and told me I should not make his mother feel bad because this was her home for 30 years and the least I could do was let them have 1 meal a week. The least I could do. I paid for this house. Every wall, every tile, every inch of that yard was mine because I spent 11 years making sure it would be. After they left, I called my buddy Nate and told him what was going on. He told me to change my locks, which I had already done after closing, but that did not matter because they did not have a key. They just showed up and rang the bell and waited until I opened it. The next Sunday, I did not answer the door. They rang it 9 times. Dottie called my phone. Reggie walked around the house and knocked on the back door. The woman with the baby sat on my porch for 40 minutes. Eventually, they left, but Dottie sent me a message saying she was very hurt and that I was being selfish with a house that held decades of memories for her family. I did not respond. The Sunday after that, I was in my backyard grilling when I heard voices inside my house. I dropped the spatula and ran back into the house through the patio door. The voices got louder as I crossed through the kitchen. When I reached the living room, I saw all of them sitting around my dining table like nothing was wrong. Dottie was pulling food out of a bag. Reggie stood at my kitchen counter pouring himself water from my fridge like he lived here. The teenagers were eating chips. The older man with the cane sat at the head of the table. The woman with the baby was changing the kid on my couch again. Dottie smiled and said they let themselves in through the back door. She said I must have forgotten to lock it. They broke into my house. I told them they needed to leave right now. Reggie laughed and said the door was open, so they figured I was expecting them. Dottie looked hurt and said she thought we had an understanding about Sundays. I never agreed to any of this. I raised my voice for the first time. I told them this was trespassing. I said I owned this house and they had no right to come in without being invited. Dottie started crying. Reggie stepped toward me close enough that I could smell his cologne. He said I was being rude to his mother. He said she gave me a great deal on this house and the least I could do was be nice. I did not back up. I pulled my phone out and told them I was calling the police if they did not leave in 2 minutes. Nobody moved. Then Reggie grabbed the food bag and told everyone to pack up. They walked toward the front door. Reggie stopped before he left and said I was going to regret being so mean to a family that just wanted to keep their traditions. I locked the doors and checked them 3 times. My hands were shaking. I called Nate right away. He said I needed cameras, a lawyer, and a deadbolt that locked with a key from both sides. By the end of that week, I had all 3. The lawyer sent a cease and desist telling the whole family they could not come on my property or contact me. I filed a trespassing report with the security footage. That Friday, Dottie left a voicemail crying and saying her father was 92 and these dinners were all he had left. I felt bad for a second. Then I remembered Reggie getting in my face in my own kitchen. I did not call her back. The following Sunday, the van pulled up at 2. I watched on the camera app. They rang the bell 9 times. Reggie tried the gate and back door, both locked. He saw the camera and gave it the middle finger for 3 full seconds. Dottie set her casserole on my welcome mat, and they left. Then the letters started. 12 handwritten letters from different family members. The teenagers wrote about growing up in that dining room. The woman wrote about getting married in that backyard. Every letter asked me to reconsider. My lawyer called and said the family contacted her asking about a compromise. She told them no and said further contact would mean a restraining order. I did not want to be the bad guy, but I could not spend the rest of my life dealing with this. I asked my lawyer about a mediator. The mediation happened the following week at a conference room downtown. Dottie cried before anyone said a word. She talked about losing her home and how Sunday dinners were all she had left. Reggie said I should have known what I was getting into. I told him their memories did not come with ownership rights. No reasonable person would think a sentimental conversation during a walkthrough was a binding agreement. The mediator asked Dottie if she understood she no longer had any legal right to enter the property. She whispered that she knew, but hoped I would be kind enough to let them continue. Then I said something I had been thinking about all week. I said they could have one final Sunday dinner, but I was going to cook the meal and set the table and host it on my terms. It was the last time. Any contact after that would result in legal action. Dottie cried but nodded. Reggie agreed. The next 6 weeks were quiet. Nobody showed up. Nobody called. Nobody left letters. I moved furniture to fit my style. I hung my pictures on the walls. I put my books on the shelves. The house started to feel like mine, not like something I was borrowing. Actually mine. And I started planning the dinner. Roasted chicken with garlic and herbs. Homemade mashed potatoes and gravy. Green beans with almonds. Cornbread from scratch. A peach cobbler using a recipe my grandmother taught me when I was 12. I practiced the whole menu twice. I wanted it perfect. Not for them, for me. The final Sunday came. I started cooking at 9 in the morning. I set the table with plates and glasses I picked out myself. I put flowers in the center and folded cloth napkins at each seat. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Dottie's eyes went wide when she saw the table set for 8 with food laid out. Steam rose from the chicken. The cornbread was sliced on a wooden board from a thrift store. The cobbler sat cooling. Reggie looked around at the new pictures on the walls, and the furniture arranged differently than his mother ever had it. His face changed. Not angry. Something else. The older man walked in and looked at the head of the table. There was a place setting there, but I was already standing behind that chair. I pulled it out and sat down. The older man paused, then sat to my left. Nobody said anything about it. I served the chicken. I passed the potatoes. I poured drinks. The family was quiet in a way they had never been before. No teenagers raiding my fridge. No one changing a diaper on my couch. They were guests in my home, and for the first time, they knew it. Dottie took her first bite and said it was delicious with surprise in her voice. I told her my grandmother taught me. Halfway through the meal, Reggie looked at me and said this was really good. No edge to his voice. Just a man eating a meal someone else cooked for him in someone else's home. When the cobbler came out, Dottie closed her eyes and said it reminded her of something her own mother used to make. I told her my grandmother probably learned it from the same era. She smiled at that. It was the first real smile she had given me that was not about trying to get something. At 3:30, I started clearing plates. Nobody argued. Reggie helped carry dishes to the kitchen without being asked. The teenagers pushed their chairs in. They all moved toward the front door. Dottie stopped in front of me. She looked around the dining room one more time, then said, this was the best Sunday dinner they ever had. She said she finally understood the tradition was never about the house. It was about being together. She said she was sorry it took her so long to see that. Reggie held out his hand, and I shook it. He said he was sorry for being aggressive. The older man stopped at the door and put his hand on my shoulder without saying anything. He just nodded once and walked out. I closed the door behind them and locked it. I stood in my hallway looking at the quiet house. The dishes were in the sink. The cobbler sat on the counter. The flowers were still fresh. I cooked them a meal in my home on my terms, and it was the meal that finally ended it. Not a lawyer letter, not a police report, not cameras or deadbolts. A table set with my dishes, food made from my recipes, and me sitting at the head of my own table. That was the moment they finally saw this house was not theirs anymore. It was mine.